They saw Imani, a whisper in the echoing halls of Northwood Academy, a prestigious institution dripping with old money and entitlement. Her dark skin was a stark contrast against the alabaster gleam of the marble floors, her presence in the gleaming, silent wheelchair an unwelcome interruption to the seamless flow of privileged lives. To the golden trio, Tiffany, Brittany, and Chad, she was less than a whisper, she was an object, a convenient repository for their casual cruelty. Tiffany, with her perfectly straightened blonde hair and eyes as cold as her father's boardroom, often led the charge. "Oh, look," she'd sneer, her voice carrying just enough for Imani and a few sycophantic onlookers to hear, "It's rolling royalty. Did your carriage break down, princess?" Laughter, sharp and cruel, would follow, bouncing off the expensive tapestries that lined the corridors, tapestries Imani knew were worth more than her family's perceived annual income. Imani's paralysis, the result of a tragic accident years ago, was their favorite taunt. They saw not a girl of immense inner strength, a mind sharper than any of theirs, but merely a broken doll. She endured their barbs, the sly trips, the accidental spills of lukewarm coffee near her wheels, with a quiet dignity that seemed to infuriate them further. Her gaze would remain steady, her hands clasped in her lap, a silent testament to a resilience they could neither comprehend nor conquer. This was the stage of her daily suffering, a relentless onslaught against her spirit. The teachers, many beholden to the powerful families of students like Tiffany, offered platitudes but no real protection. "Just ignore them, Imani," they'd say, their eyes darting away, complicit in their inaction. But Imani wasn't just ignoring them. She was observing. She was recording every sneer, every calculated humiliation, not in a diary of despair, but in the unyielding vault of her memory, a memory as formidable as any fortress. If you've ever felt underestimated, if you've ever been judged by appearances rather than the content of your character, then perhaps Imani's silent endurance will resonate deep within your soul. What happens when the underestimated find their voice, when the silent observer finally decides to act? Stay with us, because this story is far from over. Little did Tiffany, Brittany, and Chad know, the girl they tormented held a secret, a truth so monumental it would shatter their gilded world to dust. They poked a sleeping lioness, believing her to be a harmless lamb, and the awakening was drawing nearer with every venomous word they uttered. The air in Northwood Academy crackled with a manufactured excitement for the annual Founders' Day Gala, an event where the school paraded its achievements and, more importantly, its wealthiest patrons. Tiffany, Brittany, and Chad saw this as the perfect arena for their magnum opus of malice. Their hubris, fueled by generations of unchecked privilege and a profound lack of empathy, blinded them to any potential consequence. This year, Tiffany announced to her gleeful cronies in the opulent school cafeteria, her voice dripping with malicious anticipation, "We're going to give little Miss Wheel something to really remember." Founders' Day by Chad, his vacant eyes alight with a cruel spark, snickered. "What's the plan, Tiff?" Tripwire across the stage. Brittany, ever the eager follower, giggled. "Or maybe we can accidentally spill something truly disgusting on her special charity case dress." Their laughter was a harsh, grating sound, an ugly counterpoint to the refined ambience the school so desperately tried to cultivate. Tiffany, however, had something more elaborate, more publicly humiliating in mind. "Oh, much better than that," she purred, a predatory gleam in her eyes. "Imani has been chosen, through some ridiculous diversity initiative, to give a short speech. Imagine her, stammering and pathetic, and then, well, let's just say her microphone might pick up some rather unflattering feedback. Or perhaps her wheelchair will develop a mind of its own, right there on stage." Their plan was diabolical, designed not just to embarrass Imani, but to utterly crush her spirit in front of the entire school, in front of the benefactors, in front of the world they inhabited. They envisioned her tears, her helplessness, a tableau of their perceived superiority. The sheer arrogance of their plotting was breathtaking. They moved without caution, without a flicker of doubt that their social standing would insulate them from any repercussions. They whispered their plans in corridors, their voices laced with contempt, unaware that every word, every snicker was being meticulously noted, not by school authorities, but by eyes and ears they could never have imagined were watching. Imani, in her quiet corner of the library, her supposed sanctuary, overheard snippets, saw the knowing glances. Miss Eleanor, the elderly librarian with kind eyes and a spine of steel, would sometimes gently squeeze Imani's shoulder, a silent message of solidarity. Imani knew the storm was coming. She felt the familiar knot of anxiety, but beneath it, a new sensation was stirring, a cold, hard resolve. They thought they were orchestrating a prank. They were, in fact, penning the final act of their own downfall. Their confidence was a towering edifice built on foundations of sand, and the tide was about to turn with a force that would sweep them away. The grand auditorium buzzed, a sea of expectant faces, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and self-congratulation. Founders' Day was in full swing. On stage, the headmaster droned on about tradition and excellence, his words a meaningless hum against the backdrop of Tiffany's smug, anticipatory smirk from the front row. Then, it was Imani's turn. Her name was called, and a hush fell, not of respect, but of morbid curiosity, fanned by the whispers of the impending show as Imani, poised and serene, navigated her wheelchair towards the podium. Chad, positioned strategically near the sound controls with a smirk, prepared to activate their pre-recorded loop of insults. Tiffany nudged Brittany, their eyes gleaming with shared, wicked delight. Imani reached the microphone, her hand steady. She took a breath. And in that breath, the world shifted. Just as Chad's finger hovered over the button, just as Tiffany leaned forward, her lips curled in a triumphant sneer, the grand double doors at the back of the auditorium burst open with a resounding crack. Not with the polite entry of latecomers, but with the decisive, authoritative force of an undeniable presence. Two impeccably dressed, powerfully built men in dark suits stepped in, their expressions unreadable, their eyes scanning the room with unnerving precision. They were followed by a figure who commanded silence simply by existing. Tall, impeccably tailored, his presence radiating an aura of absolute power and quiet intensity, Mr. Alistair Vance, a name whispered in awe in global financial circles, a titan of industry whose face was a closely guarded enigma, strode into the auditorium. And beside him, walking with a confident, measured gait, was a woman whose face mirrored Imani's own strength, her mother, Dr. Anika Vance, a renowned neuroscientist. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Tiffany's smirk froze, then crumbled. Chad's hand recoiled from the controls as if burned. Brittany's eyes widened in disbelief. The headmaster faltered mid-sentence, his jaw agape. Imani, on stage, turned her head slightly, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. The hidden power was no longer hidden. Mr. Vance, without a word, ascended the steps to the stage, Dr. Vance following. He stood beside his daughter, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, a silent shield, a formidable declaration. He didn't need to speak, his very presence was a thunderclap. The air crackled with unspoken questions, with dawning, horrifying realization for some. Imani looked out at the sea of stunned faces, then specifically at Tiffany, Brittany, and Chad, their arrogant masks shattered, replaced by a mixture of confusion and burgeoning terror. The girl they had dismissed, tormented, and sought to publicly destroy was not who they thought she was. Not even close. She was Imani Vance, and her moment had arrived. Mr. Alistair Vance surveyed the stunned auditorium, his gaze sweeping over the assembled students, faculty, and benefactors like a searchlight exposing every shadow. His voice, when he finally spoke, was not loud, but it possessed a resonant power that filled every corner of the vast hall, each word imbued with an icy calm that was far more terrifying than any shout. "Good evening," he began, the politeness a chilling counterpoint to the tension gripping the room. "My name is Alistair Vance. And this," he gestured to Imani, his expression softening for a fraction of a second with immeasurable pride, "is my daughter, Imani Vance." A wave of murmurs swept through the audience, a collective intake of breath. The name Vance was synonymous with Vance Global, a colossal empire of technology and innovation, a name that commanded respect and, in certain circles, fear. Tiffany, Brittany, and Chad were ashen. The connection, so obvious now, had been utterly invisible to their prejudiced eyes. For months, Mr. Vance continued, his voice hardening, "My daughter has endured a campaign of targeted harassment, humiliation, and emotional abuse within the walls of this supposedly esteemed institution." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. She chose to remain silent, not out of weakness, but out of a profound strength and a desire to observe, to understand the depth of the rot that can fester even in places of supposed enlightenment. Then, with a subtle nod from Mr. Vance, the large screen behind the stage, previously displaying the school crest, flickered to life. The first image was a crystal-clear security footage still, Tiffany, mid-sneer, deliberately knocking Imani's books to the floor. Then a video, Chad and Brittany laughing as they mimicked Imani's struggles, their voices cruelly amplified. Audio clips played, their venomous whispers, their carefully plotted torments, their casual racism. Screenshots of their vile social media posts, bragging about their pranks on the charity cripple, filled the screen. The evidence was irrefutable, damning, meticulously collected. Ms. Eleanor, the quiet librarian, was then revealed on screen, calmly detailing her observations to an unseen investigator, her testimony a quiet indictment of the bullies and the school's willful blindness. "You mistook her dignity for passivity," Mr. Vance declared, his eyes fixing on Tiffany, who now looked physically ill. "You saw her wheelchair as a symbol of frailty, never imagining the iron will it contained. You judged her by the color of her skin, by your own shallow, preconceived notions, and in doing so, you revealed nothing but your own profound ugliness." The headmaster attempted to intervene, stammering apologies, but Mr. Vance silenced him with a single, glacial look. "Your apologies are as empty as your oversight, headmaster. This institution has failed. It has failed its students, it has failed its promise of a safe environment, and it has failed my daughter." He then projected financial records, showing how donations from the bullies' families often coincided with disciplinary issues being quietly swept under the rug. The unraveling was total, public, and devastating. The mask of civility had been ripped away, exposing the rotten core beneath Northwood's polished veneer. The downfall of Tiffany, Brittany, and Chad was as swift as it was spectacular, a direct and brutal consequence of their own unbridled arrogance. As the irrefutable evidence of their cruelty and their parents' complicity echoed through the stunned silence of the auditorium, their world imploded. The headmaster, his face a mask of dawning horror and career-ending dread, immediately announced their expulsion, his voice trembling. "There is no place for such behavior at Northwood Academy," he declared, a desperate attempt to salvage the school's rapidly disintegrating reputation. But it was far too little, far too late. Legal representatives from Vance Global, who had entered discreetly with Mr. Vance, now stepped forward, serving papers to the visibly distraught parents of the trio. Lawsuits for defamation, harassment, emotional distress, and conspiracy to cover up were just the beginning. The financial irregularities Mr. Vance had exposed hinted at deeper corruption, promising further investigations that would undoubtedly ensnare more than just the three families. Tiffany, her face contorted in a grotesque parody of her earlier smugness, finally found her voice, a high-pitched whine of disbelief. But it was just a joke. She didn't say anything." Mr. Vance's gaze, cold and unyielding, pinned her to the spot. "She is my daughter," he reiterated, his voice a blade. "And your jokes have consequences. You chose to inflict pain, to revel in cruelty, to believe your wealth and status made you untouchable. Today, you learn otherwise. The world will now see you not as the elite you imagine yourselves to be, but as the petty, vicious bullies you truly are." The sycophantic students who had once eagerly lapped up the trio's crumbs of attention now recoiled as if from a contagion, their faces studies in fear and belated shame. The parents of the bullies, pillars of their community moments before, were now pariahs, their carefully constructed facades crumbling under the weight of public disgrace. News crews, alerted by anonymous tips that now made horrifying sense, began to gather outside the academy gates, their cameras poised to capture the unfolding drama. The story of the Northwood bullies and the billionaire's daughter they unwittingly tormented would be headline news by morning, a cautionary tale whispered in wealthy enclaves for years to come. Their downfall was not merely a punishment, it was a public spectacle, a mirror reflecting their own hubris back at them with devastating clarity. They had sought to humiliate Imani in front of their peers, instead, their own degradation was broadcast for the world to see, a karmic retribution so precise, so fitting, it was almost poetic. They had built their fragile kingdom on the suffering of others, and now, it lay in ruins at their feet, a testament to the fact that cruelty, no matter how gilded, eventually reaps its own bitter harvest. With the immediate storm of the bullies' downfall beginning to subside, a different kind of power filled the auditorium. It was the quiet, resilient strength of Imani Vance. Her father and mother stood beside her, no longer as avengers, but as proud parents. Imani, her expression calm and resolute, addressed the hushed assembly. Her voice, once a hesitant whisper in these halls, now rang with a clarity and conviction that captivated every listener. For a long time, she began, her gaze sweeping across the faces before her. I was seen, but not truly seen. You saw a girl in a wheelchair. You saw a quiet student. Some of you saw a target. Very few of you saw me. She paused, letting her words resonate. My silence was not weakness. It was observation. It was patience. It was the gathering of strength. The challenges I face every day, the physical limitations, have taught me a different kind of fortitude, a resilience that cannot be broken by taunts or intolerance. Then, Mr. Vance stepped forward once more, not with anger, but with a vision. Northwood Academy, as it stands, has failed, he stated, his voice firm. But failure can be the seed of transformation. Therefore, Vance Global will not be withdrawing its support. Instead, we will be investing significantly. As a murmur of surprise rippled through the room. We will fund the establishment of the Imani Vance Foundation for Inclusive Excellence, he announced. This foundation, headquartered right here, will be dedicated to creating truly equitable and supportive learning environments for students with disabilities, students from marginalized communities, and any student who has ever been made to feel less than. It will fund scholarships, assistive technologies, comprehensive anti-bullying programs, and sensitivity training for educators nationwide. He turned to his daughter, his eyes filled with love and admiration. And its first chairperson will be Imani Vance. The announcement was met with a wave of stunned applause, genuine this time. The symbolic contrast was breathtaking. Imani, once confined and underestimated, was now poised to lead a national movement from a position of immense influence. She would transform her pain into purpose, her suffering into a catalyst for profound, positive change. She would not just reclaim her dignity, she would use her platform to ensure others never had to fight so hard for theirs. The sight of Imani, sitting tall and confident, a leader ready to forge a new path, was a powerful testament to the triumph of the human spirit. Her victory was not one of revenge, but of redemption, not just for herself, but for the very system that had allowed her to be victimized. It was a moral victory, resounding and complete, promising a future where empathy and understanding might finally outweigh prejudice and arrogance. The concluding moral of this story echoes through the silence left in the wake of such a dramatic upheaval. Never, ever underestimate anyone based on their appearance, their circumstances, or their quietude. True power is not found in the volume of one's voice or the weight of one's purse when used to demean or oppress. It resides in the strength of one's character, the depth of one's resilience, and the courage to meet cruelty with an unwavering commitment to dignity. Imani Vance's journey from a silently enduring student to a beacon of hope and change serves as a profound reminder that the human spirit, when tested, can reveal an extraordinary capacity not only to survive but to soar. The arrogant architects of her pain, Tiffany, Brittany, and Chad, learned a brutal lesson: hubris is a fragile shield against the relentless advance of karmic justice. Their downfall was not merely a consequence of their actions, but a direct result of their inability to see beyond their own inflated egos, their failure to recognize the inherent worth in another human being. They sought to extinguish a light, unaware that it was, in fact, a star, whose brilliance would only intensify under pressure. The Imani Vance Foundation for Inclusive Excellence would go on to change countless lives, fostering environments where differences are celebrated, and potential is nurtured regardless of background or physical ability. Imani, leading with wisdom and compassion forged in the crucible of her own experiences, became a powerful voice for the voiceless, a testament to the idea that our deepest wounds can often become the source of our greatest strength. Let this narrative serve as an inspiration. Let it remind you that within every individual lies a universe of untapped potential and that judgment without understanding is the province of fools. The quietest person in the room might just be the one holding all the cards, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal a hand that will change the game forever. For in the grand theatre of life, it is often those who are underestimated who ultimately deliver the most stunning, most cathartic, and most triumphant final act. What did you think of Imani's powerful transformation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, And if this story of resilience and justice resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspirational narratives.